The alien queen froze when she saw my wound. You can't be real. John Carter stepped off the human transport ship and onto the strange world of Vashar. The ground beneath his boots was smooth and dark, like black glass, reflecting the sky above. The sky was not blue like on Earth. It was pale green, with two suns hanging low, casting long shadows across the city. John's heart beat faster, but he kept his face calm. He had been on many worlds before, but this one felt different. It felt alive. Around him, aliens moved with purpose. They were tall, taller than any human John had seen. Their skin shimmered like metal, silver, and gold in the sunlight. Their eyes were large and bright, without pupils. John noticed the way they watched him, not with fear but with a careful curiosity. He felt small, even though he was a trained soldier. A guard stepped forward. He was taller than John and carried a weapon that looked like a long staff. "You are the human envoy?" the guard asked. His voice was calm, but John could sense power behind it. "Yes," John said, keeping his voice steady. "John Carter, representing the Earth Federation." The guard nodded and gestured toward a nearby structure. It was enormous, shaped like a spiraling tower, glowing faintly with lights that seemed alive. "The Queen will see you there," the guard said. John followed, keeping his movements careful. He knew he had to look confident, even though inside he felt nervous. Humans were rare here, and he knew many aliens thought humans were weak. John had heard stories of the Vashari. They were proud, powerful, and clever. Some even said they could sense truth and lies in a person just by looking at them. John hoped his disguise of calm confidence would be enough. As he entered the palace, John saw more of the Vashari. They were everywhere, moving like water through the halls. The walls were made of some strange material that seemed to pulse slightly, like it had a heartbeat. He felt a strange chill run down his spine. The air smelled clean but sharp, and every sound echoed softly, as if the palace itself was listening. John was led into a large chamber. At the far end, sitting on a throne of light and metal, was Queen Lyra. She was magnificent. Her skin shone like polished silver, and her eyes glowed faintly like the sun's outside. Her hair moved slightly, as if it were alive, floating around her shoulders. She looked directly at John the moment he entered. He felt her gaze like a weight pressing down on him. "Human," she said, her voice calm but strong, filling the room. "You come to my world carrying the word of your kind." John bowed slightly. "Yes, Queen Lyra. I come to speak of peace and trade. Humans wish to learn and share with your people." Queen Lyra's eyes narrowed just slightly. She seemed to study him. "Peace?" she asked. "Humans are known for war, for killing and surviving at any cost. Why should I trust you?" John took a slow breath. He had expected this question, because humans are not all war. "We survive, yes, but we also create, we heal, and we build. We can learn from each other and help each other. I am here to prove that." There was silence. John could feel the tension in the room. The Vashari around him shifted slightly, whispering to each other in their language. John didn't understand the words, but he could hear the tone. Curious, cautious, maybe even a little afraid. Queen Lyra studied John for a long moment. Then she spoke again. "You carry no weapon, yet you are not afraid. Most humans would run or beg. You do neither." John shook his head. "I am a soldier, your majesty, but I am also a human. Fear is part of life, but I do not let it control me." Queen Lyra's gaze lingered. John felt a strange sensation, like she was looking into him, seeing things he had never told anyone. He tried to remain calm, but he felt the heat of her stare. "Your body is unusual," she said finally. "There is a strength here and yet a fragility. You carry a wound, do you not?" John froze for a moment. No one had seen the scar hidden under his uniform, not even the people he worked with on his ship. It was from a battle on a distant planet, a wound that should have killed him long ago. He touched the side of his ribcage lightly, hoping she would not notice. "It is nothing," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Just a mark from my past." Queen Lyra tilted her head. "Nothing. It glows faintly under your skin. It is not natural for a human to survive this." John's stomach tightened. She had noticed. He had survived the impossible before, but this was the first time anyone else had sensed it. He forced a calm smile. "Humans are resilient," he said. Queen Lyra's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she looked startled. "Resilient," she repeated softly. "Perhaps I underestimated you." John felt a strange mix of relief and fear. Relief that she did not react violently, fear because he did not know what she now thought of him. She could be angry or afraid or curious. He did not know which. The queen rose from her throne, her movements smooth and silent. She walked closer to John, and the room seemed to grow quieter. The Vashari attendants froze in place, watching carefully. John stood his ground, though his pulse quickened. "You carry more than a wound," she said, her voice low. "There is a history here, a history that your kind cannot even remember." John shook his head. "I am just a human soldier. I do not carry legends. I carry experience. I survive." Queen Lyra studied him for another long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Perhaps survival is the greatest story of all. We will see if you truly understand it." At that moment, alarms sounded in the palace. Red lights flashed across the walls, and a deep rumble shook the floor. The Vashari guards drew their weapons, moving quickly. John's eyes widened. He had not expected trouble so soon. Queen Lyra did not move. She simply looked at him, her expression calm but alert. "You will come with me," she said. "This is not a test for humans. This is a test for you, John Carter." John followed her as she moved toward a side door, the palace hallways twisting in strange, organic patterns. The walls seemed to shift slightly as they walked. John's mind raced. What kind of danger awaited here? What was the meaning of her words? They arrived at a small observation room, high above the city. Through the window, John could see alien ships in the sky, black and angular, firing beams at the palace defenses. He had never seen anything like it. Humans had fought in space battles, yes, but the scale here was enormous. Queen Lyra stood at the window, her hands folded. "This is what I feared," she said. "My city under attack, and yet you stand here unafraid." John swallowed. "I have faced worse. Humans survive even when the impossible comes." The queen turned to him, and for the first time her expression softened. "Perhaps you are more than a soldier," she said quietly. "Perhaps you are the first human I have ever truly seen." John felt a strange warmth in his chest. He did not understand her words fully, but he sensed respect, maybe even trust. In this moment he realized that the aliens, no matter how powerful, were curious about humans. And curiosity was a powerful thing. The alarms continued, but John's mind was focused. He knew that his mission had just changed. He was no longer here to speak only of peace. He was here to survive, to prove humanity's strength in a way even Queen Lyra could understand. He straightened his back and looked at the queen. "Whatever happens, I will not run," he said. Queen Lyra nodded. "Good. Then let us see what humans can do." Outside the window, the alien ships drew closer, and the sky lit up with beams of energy. John felt the old wound in his side, a faint ache he had learned to ignore. It pulsed slightly, reminding him that he was alive and that survival was never easy. He clenched his fists. Humans survived because they refused to give up, even when the odds were impossible. And John Carter was about to prove it. In front of the most powerful queen in the galaxy after the attack began, John Carter followed Queen Lyra through the twisting corridors of the palace. The walls seemed alive, pulsing faintly with light and energy. Alarms continued to ring, echoing through the halls. Outside, John could hear the hum of alien ships moving above the city and the sharp crackle of energy weapons firing. He tightened his grip on his side, feeling the old wound ache again, but he refused to let it slow him. Humans survived through pain. He had learned that lesson long ago. "John," Queen Lyra said, her voice calm but urgent, "we need to reach the command chamber. The palace defenses are holding but barely. The attackers are fast and clever. We must coordinate our response." John nodded, keeping pace with her. He could see the strain in her movements, though she tried to hide it. Unlike humans, she had no need to display fear, yet John sensed it anyway. Her people respected her, but the Queen's eyes told a story of responsibility heavier than any human soldier had ever known. They reached a large chamber filled with alien screens and glowing panels. Vashari officers moved quickly, issuing commands to the city's defense network. John stayed back, observing. He was out of his depth here, but he had learned quickly that observation often mattered more than action. Queen Lyra approached a console and began issuing orders. John watched her fingers move, glowing slightly with some energy that interacted with the controls. She was fast, precise, commanding, and calm even under pressure. John could feel respect growing inside him for the alien queen. She was not just a ruler, she was a leader in the truest sense. "John," she said, glancing at him, "you do not need to fight yet, but your presence is important. Humans are unusual. Your people survive things that would kill others. Perhaps your insight can help us now." John swallowed. He had hoped to avoid fighting so soon, but he understood what she meant. Humans had a way of seeing things others could not. He nodded. "I'll do what I can." Queen Lyra studied him for a moment, then moved to another console. "The attackers are using coordinated strikes. They seem to know the layout of the city better than anyone should. We must adapt. Humans adapt. Perhaps you can help me see what they will do next." John stepped closer. He studied the maps, the displays of energy flows and ship movements. It was complicated, but he had learned to think quickly. Humans survived not just by strength but by strategy. He traced a path on one of the panels with his finger. "They are splitting into 3 groups," he said. "One group attacks the southern walls, another moves through the central district, and the last is holding back near the river. They are waiting for something, maybe a distraction." Queen Lyra looked at him, surprise flashing in her glowing eyes. "You predict their actions by observation alone?" she asked. John nodded. "Humans fight many battles, not just with weapons but with their minds. We look for patterns. Survival depends on noticing small details." The Queen said nothing for a moment, then nodded. "We will follow your suggestion. Send reinforcements to the central district first. The others will be delayed by barriers." John watched as her orders were carried out. The Vashari moved with astonishing speed, setting up defenses and redirecting energy shields. Yet even as they worked, John felt the ache of his old wound deep in his side. It throbbed faintly, a reminder that his body was not invincible. He had survived worse, but he could not ignore the pain. "John," Queen Lyra said softly, noticing him touch his side, "your wound, it does not seem ordinary. Why do you ignore it?" John straightened. "Humans survive with pain. It reminds us that we are alive and it keeps us moving. The wound is old. It has not killed me yet." The Queen's eyes widened slightly. She took a step closer, studying him as if trying to understand something beyond his words. "It glows faintly," she said. "The energy of it is not natural for your kind. How is this possible?" John swallowed. He had expected questions, but the Queen's tone was different. It was not just curiosity, it was awe and maybe even fear. He shook his head lightly. "I survived because I refused to die. Humans, we survive when others would give up. That is all." Queen Lyra's expression did not change completely, but the glow in her eyes flickered. She said nothing more, though John could feel the weight of her gaze. She was thinking, analyzing, trying to reconcile what she saw with what she knew of humans. Outside the observation windows, the battle continued. Alien ships streaked across the sky like silver lightning, energy beams cutting through the air. John's ears rang slightly from the sounds of explosions. He felt a shiver of anticipation and fear, but he did not move back. Humans thrived on danger, they learned from it. As the battle raged, a sudden warning sounded. The screens showed a group of enemy ships moving directly toward the palace gates. Queen Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They have found a weak point," she said. "If they break through, the city will fall. We must act quickly." John stepped forward. "They are focusing too much on the gates. The central district is their real target. If we hold the center, we can trap them." The queen considered his words. "Very well, we will hold the center, but you must stay close. This will be dangerous." John nodded, adjusting his armor. The old wound flared faintly, reminding him that he was human, fragile in ways the Vashari might not understand. Yet he felt alive, more alive than ever. Survival was his nature, and now it was his duty. He followed Queen Lyra as she moved toward the palace exit. Outside, the battle was closer than ever. Energy beams streaked across the sky, striking buildings, and explosions shook the ground. John's eyes scanned the scene. The attackers were clever, moving in unpredictable patterns, but he noticed a rhythm, tiny flaws in their timing. Humans thrived on noticing such things. "There," he said, pointing. "The eastern flank is exposed. They expect the palace guards to focus on the gates. We can use this to our advantage." Queen Lyra's eyes glowed. "Show me." John led her through side corridors and hidden passages that few humans would know how to use, even if they had been on the planet. He had studied maps, learned from his instincts, and understood human strategy. He pointed to the positions of enemy ships, the gaps in defenses, the likely paths they would take. "If we place forces here and here," John said, tracing points on a holographic map, "we can catch them in a trap. They will not expect it, and the palace will hold." Queen Lyra studied him, then nodded. "Humans think differently. Perhaps your kind's strength lies not in brute force, but in seeing the unseen." John felt a flicker of pride. Humans were underestimated everywhere, but here, on this alien world, his skills and instincts mattered. His old wound pulsed again, reminding him that he was alive, fragile, and capable all at once. As they prepared the defenses, a sudden explosion shook the corridor. John stumbled slightly, clutching his side. Queen Lyra looked at him sharply. "Your wound, are you hurt?" she asked. John shook his head, forcing a smile. "Just the old injury acting up. I am fine." She studied him for a long moment. "Humans, you endure pain that should kill you. This is impossible." John did not answer. He had no explanation beyond survival and stubbornness. Humans survived because they refused to quit. They had no choice but to keep moving forward, no matter what. Outside, the battle continued. John moved through the corridors, giving instructions, guiding troops, and keeping an eye on Queen Lyra. He noticed how the Vashari guards trusted him now, though carefully. Humans were rare, and his survival instinct, his ability to act under pressure, impressed even them. "John," Queen Lyra said quietly as they watched a fleet of ships move into position, "you may not realize it, but your kind is extraordinary. You survive things others cannot, endure what should be fatal, and yet you continue." John glanced at her, feeling the weight of her words. "We do not survive to be heroes," he said. "We survive because we must. Humans never quit, that is our strength." The Queen nodded slowly. "And yet there is something more. Your wound, your survival, it is as if legends walk among us unseen." John swallowed. He had heard whispers of legends in the galaxy, stories of humans who survived impossible odds, but he had never thought of himself as one. He was just a man who refused to die. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "the impossible is only impossible until someone does it." Queen Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes wide. She did not speak, but John could see the thought forming in her mind. Humans were not as weak as the galaxy believed. They were cunning, strong, and unyielding. The battle reached a turning point. John's strategies, combined with Queen Lyra's leadership, began to slow the enemy. Ships were destroyed, attacks deflected, and the palace defenses held. John moved carefully, his wound aching, but he refused to stop. Survival demanded it. Finally, after hours of intense fighting, the sky quieted slightly. The enemy ships withdrew, regrouping. John sank to his knees briefly, clutching his side. The pain was sharp, reminding him that he was human, yet he was alive and the city still stood. Queen Lyra approached him. She did not speak at first, only observed. Then she said softly, "You are remarkable. No human I have known could endure this and continue." John looked up at her. "I am not special. I am human. We endure even when it seems impossible. That is all." She nodded slowly, but her eyes betrayed wonder. She had seen something today that few had, a human surviving against impossible odds. And in that moment, she realized that humanity was not what she had believed. They were stronger, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous than anyone had thought. John rose slowly, grimacing as his old wound flared. He touched it lightly, acknowledging the pain, and then straightened. Humans survived because they faced pain, danger, and fear without giving in. He was alive, and he was ready for whatever came next. Queen Lyra looked at him once more. "Tomorrow we will speak of more than survival. We will speak of the future." John nodded. He did not know what that future held, but he was certain of one thing. Humans endured, humans survived, and he would prove it again. No matter the cost. After the battle, the palace was quiet, though the air still trembled from the echoes of explosions. John Carter leaned against a wall, breathing heavily, his old wound aching as always. He touched the scar lightly, remembering how deep it went, how close it had brought him to death, and how impossible it seemed that he was still alive. Queen Lyra approached, her silver skin shimmering in the dim lights of the palace hall. Her eyes glowed faintly, brighter than usual. She moved with purpose, her steps silent but commanding. John straightened automatically. Even after hours of fighting together, he felt the weight of her presence. The queen was extraordinary, and he had no doubt she could sense everything he felt, even his pain. "John," she said softly, but with a strange urgency, "come with me." He nodded, wincing slightly as he moved. His wound pulsed faintly, reminding him of its hidden strength. He followed her through the palace corridors, noticing how quiet everything had become. The Vashari guards had withdrawn, giving them space. He did not understand completely why she wanted to be alone with him, but he trusted her. Humans survived by trusting instincts, and his told him this moment was important. They entered a chamber unlike any other he had seen. The walls were dark, polished, and covered with strange symbols that glowed faintly. At the center was a large pool of light, as if a living energy floated above it. John felt the air hum with power. He had fought alien forces before, but this energy was different. It felt ancient, alive, dangerous, yet protective. Queen Lyra gestured for him to step forward. "Look at your wound, John," she said. "It is more than an injury, it carries history, power, and warning." John froze. "I do not understand," he said slowly. "It is just a scar from battle, a mistake, a near death, nothing more." Queen Lyra shook her head slowly. "No, this is no ordinary injury. It matches the descriptions of the Undying Guardian, a figure our people have feared and revered for centuries. The legends say the Guardian carries a wound that should end life, yet endures. This wound, it is exactly that." John stared at her. "Undying Guardian, I am just a human. I survived a weapon that should have destroyed me. That is all. There is nothing legendary about me." Queen Lyra's eyes glowed brighter, and for the first time, John saw a flicker of fear in her expression. "You cannot understand, human. The Undying Guardian is supposed to appear only when the galaxy faces extinction. The legends say the Guardian cannot die even when struck by weapons that erase matter. If you truly carry this wound, you are more than human." John shook his head. "I am human. I feel pain. I bleed. I survive because I refuse to die. I am not a legend. I am just stubborn." The queen stepped closer, studying him carefully. She reached out her hand, her fingers hovering just above his wound. A faint glow appeared under her touch, and John flinched slightly. He had never seen anything like this. The energy from his scar responded to her, pulsing faintly as if recognizing her presence. "Your energy," she whispered. "It resonates with the oldest forces in this galaxy. Humans, your kind, you survive in ways no other species can. You adapt to destruction, heal when impossible, and endure the impossible as if it were ordinary. This is frightening." John clenched his fists, feeling the ache of the wound sharpen. "I survived because I had no choice. Humans survive because the universe expects us to fall and we refuse. That is all. There is nothing frightening here, just life." Queen Lyra's eyes softened, but they were still wide with wonder. She took a step back. "Perhaps that is why you survived the battle today. Your body, your mind, your very being defies expectation. I have never seen this before, not in my lifetime, not in my people. You are impossible." John swallowed. He had expected admiration, maybe respect, but not this awe. He felt both pride and unease. Humans were strong, yes, but they were not immortal. This wound reminded him of that every day. Yet the Queen's words were not wrong. He had survived impossible odds, and somehow he had continued. She moved to a small console and activated it. Strange symbols glowed and shifted, displaying images from across the galaxy. John saw distant planets, alien fleets, and battles too vast to comprehend. "The legends of the Undying Guardian are not myths," Queen Lyra said. "They are warnings. When a figure with this wound appears, it signals that the galaxy faces a threat beyond comprehension. And now you are here." John's heart raced. "A threat? What kind of threat?" Queen Lyra shook her head. "I do not know yet. Only that the legends speak of darkness that consumes worlds, leaving nothing behind. The Undying Guardian appears to stand against it. And you are the first human I have ever known to match the description." John's old wound flared, sharp pain cutting through him. He doubled over slightly, gripping his side. The Queen rushed forward. "Are you harmed?" He shook his head, wincing. "It is nothing, just a reminder that I am alive. Humans survive through pain. It keeps us moving." Queen Lyra's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. She seemed to struggle with disbelief. "No human should survive this. Your existence, it breaks the rules. The universe did not expect you to live." John stood tall, despite the throbbing pain. "I do not live because the universe expects it. I live because I refuse to die. Humans survive because we endure, even when everything is against us. That is our strength, nothing more." Queen Lyra studied him silently, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is true, yet legends are not created by survival alone. They are created when survival becomes impossible, and your wound, your survival, it is impossible." She gestured toward the glowing images on the console. "The attackers today, they are part of a greater threat. They are testing the defenses, probing for weakness. If your wound is a sign, John, then perhaps humanity is needed in ways I did not understand before. Perhaps the galaxy needs humans more than I realized." John shook his head. "I do not know about legends or signs. I only know survival. Humans endure. We act. We fight when necessary. We keep moving forward. That is all I can do." Queen Lyra's expression softened. She took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Your wound, it is not just a scar. It carries energy from your survival, a force that does not belong to ordinary beings. It is as if the universe itself refuses to let you die. And yet you claim to be just human. How is this possible?" John looked at her, his face calm. "It is possible because humans are stubborn. We do not give up. We survive when others would surrender. We heal when others would fall. That is what it means to be human. The universe does not need to give us power. We create it in ourselves by refusing to quit." Queen Lyra's eyes widened. She reached out again, this time placing her hand lightly on his shoulder. The glow from his wound pulsed faintly under her touch. "Your kind is stronger than I ever imagined. The galaxy underestimates you. Perhaps it always has." John nodded. He felt the Queen's power, her understanding, and her respect. Humans had always been underestimated, yet they endured, adapted, and survived. He felt a quiet pride, tempered by the constant ache in his side. Survival was never easy. It demanded everything, including the strength to face pain without faltering. Queen Lyra stepped back, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "You carry a burden, John Carter, not just your wound, but the responsibility that comes with it. If the legends are true, the galaxy may need you more than any human has ever been needed." John swallowed. He did not seek responsibility beyond survival. He only knew that humans endured. "I will do what is necessary," he said simply. "Humans survive. If survival is needed, we will provide it." The Queen's expression softened further. She nodded slowly. "Then you are the first human I have ever truly seen, not as a weak, fragile being, but as one who carries survival itself. Perhaps this is why you exist now in this moment." John felt a strange calm wash over him. He had faced impossible odds before, but never had he felt the weight of legend, or the awe of a queen who realized that humans were more than they seemed. His wound throbbed, a reminder of pain, survival, and stubborn endurance. Outside the palace, the city was quiet for now. The enemy had retreated, regrouping for another attack. John knew that more battles awaited. Yet in this chamber, with Queen Lyra standing beside him, he realized something important. Survival was not just about fighting. It was about enduring, adapting, and proving strength in the face of impossibility. He touched his wound lightly. It had brought him here, into the presence of the Queen, into the heart of a galaxy that underestimated humans at every turn. He would survive. He would endure. And somehow he would continue, no matter what the legend said. Queen Lyra studied him one last time. "Human," she said softly, "you are impossible, and yet the galaxy may need impossible things to survive." John nodded. "Then I will do my part. Humans always survive." And in that moment, a quiet understanding passed between them. The Queen had seen the truth of humanity. Humans were not weak, not fragile, not ordinary. They endured, they survived, and they carried the impossible in their very being. The next day, John Carter woke early, his old wound aching faintly as always. He had learned to ignore the pain most of the time, but it reminded him that he was human. Queen Lyra had requested his presence in the palace early in the morning. The previous night's revelations still hung heavy in the air, and John knew that the Queen had been thinking about what he truly represented. Humans were no longer just outsiders to her. They were something far more. He followed the corridors of the palace, the walls still pulsing faintly with energy. The city outside was quiet for now, though the scars of the previous day's attack were visible. Buildings had been damaged, energy shields scorched, and the streets were littered with debris. Humans were not known here for strength, yet John knew that his presence and the knowledge of human endurance had shifted the Queen's perception. She was beginning to understand something she had never realized. Humans survive where others fail. Queen Lyra waited in a chamber at the top of the palace. She did not speak immediately. She simply watched John as he entered. He could feel her eyes studying him, glowing faintly, searching for something deeper than the surface. "John," she said finally, "your wound, it is extraordinary. I have studied it, scanned it, and yet it defies explanation. Your kind humans, you endure the impossible." John shook his head. "I am not extraordinary. I am human. We survive because we must. The universe does not care if we live or die. We adapt, endure, and keep moving. That is all." Queen Lyra's expression softened, but her eyes glowed brighter with understanding. "Perhaps that is why you survived yesterday's battle. The attackers tested the palace, and yet you stood unharmed where others might have fallen. Your wound, your survival, it is a testament to human resilience." John looked at her. "Resilience is simple. Humans face pain, danger, and fear every day. We survive because we refuse to quit. That is our nature, nothing more, nothing less." She nodded slowly. "And yet the galaxy does not know this. Many species underestimate your kind. They think humans are fragile, weak, and ordinary, but your presence here proves otherwise. Your kind is far more capable than anyone imagines. John felt a flicker of pride, tempered by the constant ache in his side. Humans were underestimated everywhere, yet he had survived impossible odds. The Queen's recognition mattered, but it also carried weight. Humans were now being seen as a force to be reckoned with, and that recognition came with responsibility. Outside, the city stirred. Vashari citizens moved cautiously, repairing damage and reinforcing defenses. The threat of another attack lingered, but there was hope now. Hope because a human stood among them, unbroken, unwavering, and alive despite what should have been a fatal wound. "We cannot wait for the attackers to strike again," Queen Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "We must prepare, and I believe your insight can guide us." John nodded. "We can use their patterns against them. Humans survive by observing, learning, and adapting. We find weaknesses others cannot see and exploit them. That is what we will do." Queen Lyra studied him closely. "Then show me." John moved to a large holographic map of the city and surrounding skies. He traced the paths of the enemy ships, noting where they had attacked, how they had moved, and where their forces were weakest. "They rely on speed and distraction," he said. "They expect brute force to work against the palace. But if we anticipate their moves, we can trap them." Queen Lyra's eyes glowed brighter as she followed his analysis. "Your strategy is different. Humans think in ways we do not. It is subtle, precise, and unexpected. Perhaps that is your true strength." John shrugged. "We survive by noticing what others ignore. Humans endure because we adapt. Observation, patience, and persistence, that is how we live." The Queen nodded slowly. She seemed to absorb his words, letting them sink in. "Then we will act on your strategy. The palace will hold and the city will survive. But you must be ready. Humans endure, yes, but danger still comes." John flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar ache in his side. His wound throbbed faintly, but he ignored it. Humans survived through pain. It reminded them that they were alive. That survival required attention, focus, and action. "I am ready," he said simply. Outside, the enemy fleet had returned. Their ships moved with precision, dark and angular against the pale green sky. Energy beams streaked across the air, striking buildings and barriers. John moved quickly, guiding Vashari forces, coordinating defenses, and keeping an eye on Queen Lyra. He noticed patterns in the enemy movement, subtle flaws that humans were trained to exploit. "Here," he said, pointing at a gap in their formation. "They are overextending. If we reinforce this point and block their retreat, we can trap them." Queen Lyra nodded, issuing commands. Vashari troops moved with astonishing speed, setting up barriers and preparing counterattacks. John guided them, using his knowledge of strategy, timing, and prediction. Humans survived by thinking ahead, by preparing for the unexpected, and by refusing to surrender. The battle raged fiercely. Ships collided, beams flashed, and explosions shook the ground. John moved through the chaos, his wound aching but ignored. He noticed a squad of attackers trying to flank the palace. He directed Vashari forces to intercept them. The human mind saw patterns where others saw chaos, and John used this to their advantage. Queen Lyra watched him closely. She had seen humans in stories, in myths, and in distant reports. None had prepared her for this. Humans were clever, adaptable, and relentless. John was wounded, yes, but he moved with precision, guiding the battle as if he were the center of a living strategy. "Your people," she said quietly to herself, "they endure what no one else can. They survive because they refuse to quit. They adapt, learn, and continue. No one expects it, yet it is unstoppable." John did not hear her, focused on the battlefield. He moved quickly, directing forces, anticipating enemy moves, and exploiting weaknesses. His old wound flared suddenly, sharp and deep, but he did not falter. Humans survived because they endured pain without giving in. That was his strength. Slowly, the tide of the battle shifted. The enemy ships, clever but predictable in their reliance on brute force, began to falter. Vashari forces, guided by John's insight, anticipated every move. Barriers blocked attacks, countermeasures destroyed enemy ships, and the city's defenses held. Queen Lyra watched in amazement. Humans were not just soldiers, they were survival incarnate. John's wound, the mark that should have killed him, was a symbol of something greater. Humans endured, adapted, and overcame the impossible. She had never seen anything like it. As the battle neared its climax, John moved to a high point, directing Vashari forces with calm authority. His wound throbbed sharply now, but he clenched his teeth and ignored it. Survival demanded focus. Humans endured pain because it reminded them they were alive and capable. Finally, the enemy fleet began to retreat. Ships moved away, disorganized and defeated. The city was damaged but safe. John stood on the high platform, breathing heavily, his wound aching but ignored. He had survived impossible odds once again. Queen Lyra approached him. Her expression was a mix of awe, respect, and something else, gratitude. "Human," she said softly, "your kind is extraordinary. You endure what others cannot, survive what should be fatal, and yet you continue. I understand now. Humans are not weak. Humans are survival itself." John nodded, feeling the familiar ache in his side. His wound had brought him here, through impossible battles, into the heart of a city that had been saved by his guidance and resilience. Humans survived because they refused to quit, because they endured, and because they acted when others faltered. Queen Lyra looked at him with newfound respect. "The galaxy underestimates humans, but now I see the truth. You are not just a soldier, John Carter. You are a symbol of what humanity can achieve. Survival, endurance, and the impossible made real." John smiled faintly, ignoring the sharp pulse in his side. "I am not a symbol. I am human. We survive because we must. We endure because giving up is not an option. That is all." She nodded slowly, understanding him completely. Humans were underestimated everywhere, yet they carried strength that defied belief. John's wound, impossible as it seemed, had become proof of their resilience. He survived, endured, and guided others through the impossible. That was humanity. Outside, the city began to recover. Repairs started, barriers were reinforced, and Vashari citizens moved cautiously but with hope. The threat was not gone, but survival had been proven. John's presence, his guidance, and his endurance had changed how humans were seen here forever. Queen Lyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "Human," she said softly, "the galaxy will never forget today. You have shown what humans truly are. Survival incarnate, enduring, unyielding, and impossible to defeat." John touched his side lightly, feeling the familiar pain. "We survive because we refuse to die. Humans endure because it is what we do. Nothing more, nothing less." Queen Lyra nodded slowly, understanding everything in those simple words. Humans were extraordinary not because of weapons or technology, but because of resilience, endurance, and the refusal to surrender. John's wound was proof of that truth. And in that moment, both human and alien understood something powerful. Humans were not just participants in the galaxy. They were a force of survival itself, unstoppable when faced with the impossible. The sun rose over the Vashari city, pale green light spilling across the black glass streets. John Carter stood at the palace balcony, his wound aching faintly, as it always did. The night's battle had passed, but the memory of danger remained. He could feel the pulse of the city beneath him, alive and tense. The enemy had retreated, but they would return. They always did. Survival demanded preparation, endurance, and courage. John had all three. Queen Lyra joined him silently. She had been watching the city rebuild, directing her people to reinforce barriers and repair energy conduits. Her silver skin shimmered in the early light, and her glowing eyes reflected both determination and respect. She turned to John, her expression calm but serious. "Human," she said, "today we face more than a city attack. The fleet that threatened us is gathering elsewhere. Reports indicate a larger force approaching. This time it will not be small. The galaxy may face its greatest danger." John nodded, his hands tightening at his sides. His wound throbbed faintly, but he ignored it. Humans survived through pain. It reminded them they were alive and capable. He had survived impossible wounds before, and he would do it again. "Then we prepare," John said simply. "Humans endure, we survive, and we act. The enemy will not see what is coming." Queen Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. She had seen the truth of humanity. Humans did not need legends or myths to be powerful. They survived because they refused to surrender. John's wound, impossible as it seemed, was proof. It had carried him through death itself, and now it would inspire her people. "Then we will fight together," she said. "Humans and Vashari side by side. Your presence here changes everything. I have seen it." John nodded. The enemy fleet was vast, but humans thrived against impossible odds. They had fought in space, on planets, in darkness and chaos. Their strength was not only in weapons, but in endurance, intelligence, and stubborn survival. He had faced death many times, and each time he had adapted. He would do it again. The city gates opened, revealing a horizon filled with black, angular ships. The enemy had arrived, faster and stronger than before. Vashari troops lined the streets, energy shields humming, weapons ready. John moved among them, giving directions, positioning defenses, and spotting weaknesses. His old wound pulsed sharply, but he ignored it. Humans endured pain. It reminded them to act, to survive, and to fight. Queen Lyra stood beside him, her gaze scanning the approaching fleet. She had never expected humans to survive such wounds, to act with such clarity under pressure, and yet here he was, guiding her forces. She felt a strange mixture of awe and respect. Humans were extraordinary. They survived, endured, and adapted in ways no other species could. "John," she said softly, "you will lead the Vashari Center defense. Your strategies yesterday were perfect. The enemy underestimated humans, but they will not underestimate you again. Are you ready?" John touched his side lightly. "I am ready. Humans survive, and today is no different. We endure and we act. That is what we do." Queen Lyra nodded. The Vashari prepared for battle, moving quickly and efficiently. John studied the enemy fleet carefully. He noted patterns, timing, and weaknesses. Humans survived by observing what others ignored, by acting where others hesitated. He would use that to guide the defense. The first attack wave hit the city. Energy beams streaked across the sky, striking buildings and barriers. John moved quickly, directing Vashari troops to intercept, repositioning forces to exploit enemy weaknesses. His wound flared sharply, but he clenched his teeth. Survival demanded endurance. Humans survived by refusing to give in to pain, and he would prove it again. Queen Lyra watched him closely. Humans were not as the galaxy believed. They were more than soldiers, more than warriors. They were survival incarnate. John's presence, his guidance, and his endurance had shifted the course of the battle. The enemy underestimated him, and that mistake would cost them dearly. John noticed a squad of enemy ships attempting to flank the city. He quickly ordered a counterattack, positioning Vashari energy barriers to block their path and leading specialized units to intercept. His knowledge of human tactics, adaptation, observation, and persistence gave them the edge. The enemy faltered, confused by strategies they could not predict. Queen Lyra stepped closer. "Human," she said quietly, "your people endure what others cannot. You survive the impossible. I understand now. Humans are not myths. You are the galaxy's proof of survival itself." John nodded, ignoring the sharp pulse in his side. "We survive because we must. We endure because surrender is not an option. Humans act when others hesitate. That is all. The enemy fleet regrouped for another assault. This time they were larger, stronger, more coordinated. John felt the familiar tension in his chest. The wound in his side pulsed again, sharper than ever. But humans endured pain. It reminded them that they were alive, capable, and ready to act. He had survived impossible odds before. He would do it again. Vashari forces, guided by John's strategies, prepared for the attack. Barriers were reinforced, energy fields repositioned, and specialized units moved into hidden positions. John noticed a pattern in the enemy fleet. They relied on predictable timing and overconfidence. He would use that against them. "Here," he said to Queen Lyra, pointing at the approaching ships. "They are counting on the gates. We will let them advance slightly, then trap them from both sides. Their confidence will be their weakness." Queen Lyra's eyes glowed with understanding. "Then it is as you say. Humans survive because they see what others cannot. We will follow your lead." The enemy struck the gates, energy beams pounding against barriers. John moved quickly, signaling Vashari units to block flanks and trap the fleet. The enemy faltered as they were caught in crossfire, confused by defenses they had not anticipated. Humans thrived on exploiting the impossible. John's tactics proved it once again. His wound flared sharply, pain slicing through him. He doubled over slightly but forced himself upright. Humans survived by enduring pain without surrender. It reminded them they were alive. John continued directing the defense, every movement precise, every decision calculated. His human instinct for survival guided the battle. Slowly, the tide turned. The enemy fleet weakened under concentrated defenses. Vashari ships moved strategically, guided by John's instructions, exploiting every weakness in the enemy formation. The city remained intact, defended by humans' cunning and the Queen's leadership. Queen Lyra watched in awe. Humans were extraordinary. John's wound, impossible as it seemed, was proof of endurance, survival, and resilience. The enemy had underestimated him, and now they were paying the price. Humans acted where others faltered, survived where others fell, and endured where others gave up. Finally, the enemy began to retreat. Ships pulled back, disorganized, their morale broken. The city remained safe. John stood at the high balcony, breathing heavily, his wound still aching but alive and unbroken. Humans survived because they refused to surrender, because they endured, and because they acted when others hesitated. Queen Lyra approached, her eyes glowing with respect and admiration. "Human," she said softly, "your people endure the impossible. Your wound, your survival, it is proof that humans are more than anyone believed. Survival itself walks among us in your form." John touched his side lightly, feeling the familiar ache. "We survive because it is who we are. Humans endure because quitting is not an option. That is all." The Queen nodded slowly. She had seen the truth. Humans were underestimated everywhere, but they were extraordinary. John's wound, impossible as it seemed, had proven humanity's strength, resilience, and survival. He had led, endured, and inspired. Outside, the city began to recover. Vashari citizens repaired buildings, reinforced defenses, and moved with renewed hope. The enemy fleet had been repelled, humiliated by humans, unpredictable strategies, and endurance. John's presence, his human resilience, and his guidance had changed the course of the battle and the perception of humans forever. Queen Lyra stood beside him, her eyes soft but glowing. "Human," she said quietly, "the galaxy will never forget today. You have shown what humans truly are. Survival incarnate, enduring, unyielding, and impossible to defeat." John smiled faintly, ignoring the sharp pulse in his side. "Humans survive because we refuse to quit. We endure because it is what we do. Nothing more, nothing less." She nodded, understanding completely. Humans were extraordinary not because of technology or weapons, but because of endurance, survival, and the refusal to surrender. John's wound was proof of that truth. He survived, endured, and guided others through impossible odds. That was humanity. And in that moment, the Queen and the human soldier understood something greater than legend. Humans were not just part of the galaxy. They were a force of survival itself. Impossible to defeat, unstoppable when faced with the odds, and enduring beyond what anyone imagined. The sun rose higher, light reflecting off black glass streets, and John Carter stood firm, wounded but alive. Humans survived. Humans endured. And now, humans had shown the galaxy exactly why they could never be underestimated.